Many people come to London to admire its famous landmarks, but few realize they are standing in a city reborn from the ashes. Not just the iconic sights, not just the postcard views, but a London that emerged from the ruins of a fire that changed the city forever. And on this journey, you'll see exactly where that story still lives in London today. The daily newspaper you scroll through on your phone? London. The police force? London. The stock exchange, coffee house culture, street lighting, shop window displays, all born in one chaotic, brilliant, filthy, and magnetic city in the same century. And here's what's remarkable. Using advanced AI techniques, we can now take the actual paintings and engravings made by artists who lived there, people like William Hogarth, Canaletto, and dozens of others, and reconstruct what those streets, those buildings, those faces actually looked like in motion. To understand London in the 1700s, you have to go back to 1666, because London entered the 18th century as a city that was no longer what it had been. It was a city that had been almost entirely burned to the ground. The Great Fire began at a bakery on Pudding Lane in the early hours of September 2nd. A small fire, the kind that broke out constantly in a city built almost entirely of wood. But that summer had been extraordinarily dry, and a strong east wind turned that small flame into something unstoppable. London burned for 4 days. Around 13,000 houses were destroyed, 87 churches, the medieval St. Paul's Cathedral, gone. Around 70,000 people were left homeless in a city of roughly 350,000. The scale of the loss was almost unimaginable. But from that destruction came something extraordinary, though not immediately, and not without tremendous suffering. The rebuilding of London laid the foundation for everything that would follow in the next century. Architect Christopher Wren was given one of the greatest commissions in history: rebuild the city. He designed over 50 churches across London, but his masterpiece was the new St. Paul's Cathedral, which took 35 years to complete and was finally consecrated in 1710. Its enormous dome dominated the skyline for the next 2 centuries, visible from nearly every part of the city. By 1700, London had around 600,000 people. It was the largest city in Europe, and it was still growing at a pace that no one could really control. Walking through the city, you would encounter 2 entirely different worlds, almost layered on top of each other. To the west, in Westminster and the newly developing squares of Mayfair, the aristocracy and merchant elite were building one of the most elegant urban landscapes in Europe. Grosvenor Square, St. James's Square, wide tree-lined streets of 5- and 6-story neoclassical townhouses, filled inside with chandeliers, fine porcelain, and liveried servants. To the east, around the docks and the old city, an entirely different story was unfolding. The streets here were narrow and dark. Buildings leaned in over you. Open sewers ran down the middle of the road. Human waste, horse dung, refuse from slaughterhouses and tanneries, all of it flowing freely. And when it rained, the streets were nearly impassable. Contemporary writers describe the smell as almost unbearable. And at the center of it all, linking north and south, was the old London Bridge. a structure unlike any bridge you could picture today. It was covered in buildings, shops, houses, a chapel, all 3 to 4 stories high, built directly over the river. In harsh winters, those same narrow arches caused the river to freeze over, and Londoners held frost fairs right on the ice. Now we need to talk about gin, because in the 1720s, London fell into a problem that, by modern standards, sounds almost darkly comic, if its consequences weren't so devastating. Gin was introduced to England from the Netherlands in the late 1600s. By the 1720s, it was everywhere. And when we say everywhere, we mean it literally. Estimates suggest that by the 1740s, roughly 1 in 8 houses in London's poorer districts was selling gin, with no license and no restrictions whatsoever. It was cheap, far cheaper than beer, and for people living in desperate conditions, it was a way to feel nothing for a few hours. The numbers are staggering. In 1743, London alone consumed over 8 million gallons of gin. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 14 gallons per adult per year, in a city where infant mortality was already catastrophic. Historian Oscar Sherwin later called it the disease of the poor and the destroyer of life. This was the reality lurking just beneath the grand architecture. The same city raising the finest buildings in Europe was watching its poorest residents drink themselves to death. While the poor struggled, London's middle and upper classes were living through something genuinely thrilling: the birth of a modern commercial world. At the Royal Exchange, founded in 1565, but now at the height of its importance, merchants from across the world gathered twice a day to do business. Then, there were the coffee houses. By the 1720s, London had over 500. Each one was a hub for a particular trade or interest. Jonathan's Coffee House in Exchange Alley was where stock traders gathered. It would later become the London Stock Exchange. Writers, playwrights and wits met at Will's, near Covent Garden. Scientists and philosophers drank coffee at the Grecian, near the Royal Society. Entry cost 1 penny. For just a penny, you could walk in and sit there all day, reading newspapers, hearing conversations, joining debates. For the price of a cup of coffee, a craftsman could access the same information as a duke. In a very real sense, this was the birth of public intellectual life. The press fed this culture voraciously. After the Licensing Act lapsed in 1695, the press was almost entirely free, and it exploded. By the 1720s, London had dozens of newspapers publishing daily, twice weekly, or weekly. They covered crime, politics, gossip, international news, ships arriving in port, and the price of sugar. For the first time in history, an ordinary person could know what was happening on the other side of the world within a week or two of it occurring.
To the exchange, quickly now. Aye, sir. Consider it done. Is the manifest included? All there. Find the tide. The London Gazette. Get your copy here. The Flying Post. Only a penny.
London was not a safe city by any standard. Crime was everywhere, and fear of crime spread even further. Pickpockets worked the theatres and markets. Gangs roamed Fleet Street and the Strand. Highway robbery, holding up coaches on the roads into the city, became so common it was almost routine. The criminal justice system responded with extreme severity. In the early decades of the century, over 200 offenses in law were punishable by death.
Mercy on his soul.
Stealing a handkerchief worth more than a shilling, shoplifting goods worth more than 5 shillings, cutting down a young tree in an orchard. The punishment was hanging, carried out publicly at Tyburn, near where Marble Arch stands today, in front of crowds of tens of thousands. These executions were public spectacles. Street vendors sold food and drink. Seats in the stands surrounding the gallows were rented for money. The condemned were carted through the streets from Newgate Prison, and the crowd, depending on the crime, depending on the criminal's name, might jeer or cheer. By the end of the 1700s, London had around 1 million people. Without question, it was the largest city in the Western world. Paris, its nearest European rival, had around 550,000. Bristol, England's second city, hadn't yet reached 80,000. London's prosperity in the 1700s was built on commerce, and much of that commerce was itself built on exploitation, on the forced labor of enslaved people, on the colonial extraction from people who had no say whatsoever. A city that invented the novel while children were dying from gin. A city that debated liberty in its coffeehouses, while its ships carried enslaved people across the Atlantic. If you found this journey through Georgian London as fascinating as we did making it, hit like. It genuinely helps us reach more people who love history. And if you want to be there when we bring another city or another century back to life, subscribe to the channel. We have many more stories to tell. See you in the next video.